Hi pumpkins! A quick note before I even get into talking or not talking about the drawing, as the case may or may not be, because who knows what's going to come out of my mouth. I certainly don't. I did change my YouTube channel name to Unicorn Tracks. That is a handle that I've used on other websites for other creative purposes, and I'm actively self-sabotaging myself enough on YouTube with other choices that I'm making that I figured I should probably conform, as much as, no one wants to conform, but I thought maybe I should commit to making that choice and change my name to something that is at least somewhat recognizable as mine. And because I have a personal rule where whenever I upload something on any website whatsoever, I have this rule that if I upload something, then I also comment on somebody else's thing, because I try to live with the philosophy of be the community that you want to have. If I want people to interact with me, then I also need to go interact with other people, never mind the fact that I am an actual hermit living alone in the woods, and I am terrible at being social, and it's exhausting. But, so since I've actually started using my YouTube, that means I've also been commenting on the people that I follow and their videos and things, and as much as I liked my last username, it was meant to be a joke about myself, and I didn't want to be commenting on other people and having them think that my self-depreciating joke was actually at them, because it absolutely never was. Not that anyone said that, and not that I had a problem with that or anything. I just thought overall it was probably wiser to change from a joke to something that I do use actively and have used in the past. So, if you notice the name change, that's why. I just thought it'd be smarter. Not that I have still made my name universal across all platforms. My Instagram is still a delightful mess, and I can't imagine changing that, even though I'm of course very fond of Unicorn Tracks. But also a delightful mess is just who I am, so that one's gonna stay. And it's so informal, maybe someday I'll change it, but right now, Instagram and YouTube are different. That's the point. Instagram and YouTube are different. And I did make the choice to change my name here, so that's why that happened, if you noticed, and I don't imagine that anyone did, but just in case, don't be scared, still me. Okay, so the drawing. You may notice that it is neither a mermaid or currently mermay anymore. However, when I started drawing this, I had wanted to draw a mermaid food dog. Not that I didn't want to draw traditional mermaids, it's just drawing people's really hard, and that's something I'm working on. So I thought it'd be fun to merge a couple of things together, and I wanted to do, multiple sets of mermaid things, but of course life happens and everyone's busy and I'm busy, and family shenanigans, life shenanigans, and plums. I am quite consumed with my wild plum trees right now. But this actually started out as a traditional sketch, an analog sketch in my sketchbook. I had drawn a pretty rough thumbnail version of what I wanted, and it was kind of it was a more romantic, soft lines, had the cameo, it was sort of like a cameo shaped portrait, and it was a food dog with the same sort of expression, a sort of wistful gazing off into the distance expression, but it was surrounded by coral reef and underwater plants, and it had just a romantic feeling to it. That's the only word I can really think of. And then when I resketched it digitally, I wasn't feeling it quite the same on this sketch as the analog one. So it ended up possibly losing its tail. You can't really tell from this pose. I was having a lot of problems there. I don't use the buttons on my Intuos, the little buttons on the side. I usually have them completely disabled and I don't know what any of the buttons are, and for once I was trying to use them, because this picture was a lot of me trying really hard to fix minor things. So I tried to use that and it was just a nightmare, and there's some physical problems with using those buttons and like the touch screen anyway, which I'm not really that's all there is to say about it. There's some physical difficulties that happen with that touch screen, so that's what those shenanigans were about. But this is Schrodinger's mermay submission was the point of before. I don't remember where I stopped talking because words. So this was meant to be a mermaid, and then in the end, when I resketched him digitally, the face sort of looked more sad and longing than just the cameo style portrait that the first one had. And I liked the first one. I enjoyed like the little thumbnail in my sketchbook, but that just wasn't who this foo dog was. So I went with it. I didn't force it into the original thumbnail because it wasn't, I didn't think it was going to work as well. And the big, like, rolling clouds of their maids made me think of, and because, you know, he's clearly in the sea, it made me think of seafoam, and, you know, there's that original, the Hans Christian Andersen version of The Little Mermaid has the mermaid dies and turns into seafoam, and that's her potential redemption, is, her life as seafoam. Which sounds terrible, but it kind of had a sweet potential thought to it, where, you know, she was also light and in the air and rising above, and it had its charm, as to me as a child and now. So I certainly wasn't going to fight the feeling of like a wistful sort of longing from this creature when I drew them instead of the original sketches feeling. So I tried to limit my palette mostly. I didn't know what that layer was. There was just a random layer. I was like, why is this blank layer here? I don't remember making it. Anyway, so I limited my palette. It was an intentional choice that I made here. And Chinese, like, guardian lions, foo dogs, whatever you want to call them, the way I think of them, they're always sitting in a pair at the top of like a great big staircase, guarding the entrance to a library. I know that's not really, like, they are everywhere or anywhere and will guard many things, but the way I think of them, like in my heart and soul, the default place for a foo dog is at like an ancient, crumbling library of knowledge and information, and they're there to guard it until the end of time. And so drawing this one, looking a little bit lonely and lost and looking off into the distance at sea, I genuinely forget to breathe while I'm trying to talk to you guys because talking is stressful. I just forget to breathe. So I'm interrupting myself and then I don't remember where I was. I'm very sorry. My brain just does not continue the thread of thought very well. But what I was trying to say is that I wanted to limit the palette and I wanted to sort of leave my foo dog feeling a little bit of isolated and lonely, because that's what I was thinking about when I was drawing them, because they're not at a temple or a library, or they're not guarding anything as far as I can see. There's too much, mist and fog, and they're alone on a rock looking off at something or remembering something. I don't know. So I thought maybe once they were a guardian of a place or a temple or a library or whatever, and it sunk below the sea, or it was broken apart or destroyed, or so I was thinking of this guardian who doesn't have anything tangible to guard anymore, and that intangibility tied back into the seafoam, which is where the color palette comes from. it's just what I was thinking about as I drew it. It's not, you know, how you have to look at it and think of it, but that's what was going through my mind as I was working on this. I did work on this in a couple of different sittings, which is normal, but this one had a couple of extra ones. Like, I kept doing much smaller sittings with more breaks in between. And I do like to take a break and like leave things sitting for a couple of days or a week or whatever, because with digital art, it's harder to get distance from your own work. If you're working on an oil painting or an analog painting or an analog piece of art at all, you can just step back and you get all the distance you need. You can see it up close and you can see it far away. And it's so much easier for me to get like the emotional distance to look at things a little bit more objectively on analog art than it is on digital art. So for digital art, I do intentionally take big breaks in the middle of working on things, and that does help. It lets me see things from a new perspective when I look at them next. But this picture was kind of a torment, because every single time I took a break, I actively was like, okay, there's a major thing that I want to work on with like my own art and my own abilities. So, plagued by moths. I love them, but plagued. Okay. So one of the times I was looking at this, and I had begun to detail the hair early on, and I really liked how the eyebrows turned out, and I was really liking how the beginning of the mane came from the head looked. But as I was working on it and I started to spread that texture, I realized that I don't want to texture the whole piece with the same level of, like, detail, which you never do. Like, you want to have your focal point. But I didn't want to refine all of the edges. I don't want to hide the fact that this is a drawing. This is something that I have created. I don't need the smoothest lines, and I don't need everything to be perfectly blended, and I don't need perfect lines. And that's just something I was thinking about and dealing with when I started working on that hair, was the strong idea that I want this to look good, of course, but I don't want to hide the fact that I'm drawing something. And that's actually a trap that I think a lot of creativity, like a lot of creative works fall into. I think this happened with the game industry, where like the PlayStation from 2 to 3, they got so good with their graphics that everyone was making games that were just hyper realistic, and there was nothing that was a little quirky and offbeat that was coming out for a good long time, except for the occasional thing by an indie developer, and that's not quite the case anymore. But I think people just got so excited that they could make things that were just so stunning and realistic that they forgot to ignore that. Like, I think that's just a thing that happens. It's like when people learn how to do something like quote-unquote properly, they get stuck in it for a little while because they're just so excited that they can do it, so they do. And that's a theory that I've had for a long time that just happens to people and artists. But it really hit a point with me when I was working on this hair that I just wanted to step back and not be precious with it. So I actually took my glasses off and I like scooted really far back, and I was squinting at my screen so everything was blurred, because I have the smaller version of the canvas over on the side for a reason, so that I can see things without, like, as the whole. Like, there were a lot of times during this picture where I would start to add detail in, like fluffing up certain pieces, and then I'd look over the little one and go, okay, you can't see that, and there's no point for it to be there. I'm too close and I need to back off, because that's what that canvas is there for. But I thought I needed to get even further back, like physically and emotionally, from the hair, and I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. Is it perfect? No, but I'm enjoying the fact that I let it be what it is, and that's something that I do want to work on more, is finding the line between like the right amount to render versus over rendering because I can, because I don't want to destroy my piece just because I can go further. That's not something I ever want to do. And that's something that I've been aware of and afraid that I do for a very long time, but I never really knew how to work on it, and there's always so much to work on. With this picture alone, I reached a point of, I have to finish it in this next session because I keep stopping to do a study on this or that. I keep stopping to look at lion paws when they're resting. I keep stopping to look at like some of the old masters and how they paint hair, and just how they can get so much detail with so few lines, and like listening to advice on how people think is the quote-unquote right way to paint, which is of course complete baloney. There is no right way to paint, but I just kept stopping and doing this active study of various bits and pieces, and there's even more I could have done. I really would like to do some studies of lion faces, because like, this is a foo dog, which I did you probably noticed during the picture is that I kept pushing and pulling the face and nose and everything and the ear, because I kept wanting to make it more or less a lion. And it got real doggy at one point, and then it got too lion at one point, and I kept pushing and pulling there, and I didn't even include all the ornamental details that a lot of foo dogs have, but that was just something I kept working on in this piece, was just stopping and studying one small component until I felt okay, and then I'd come back, and then I'd stop in the middle because I felt like I needed to study something else. Like I really needed to study lion paws when they were relaxed, because I have the gist of it. I could fake it. A lot of people wouldn't know any better if I went and drew a lion paw without studying it, because I can fake it pretty well, but it's been so long since I've done any like sort of focused study on lions that I should have done more before I started this, and on foo dogs in general, even though that's a completely different can of worms. So I kept doing that to myself, and I reached a point of like, I have to be done with this. As much as I like it and as much as I'm enjoying it, I'm going to end up working on the little bits and pieces so much that I'm going to lose my affection for it. So I'm really glad that I did stop when I did. Like, is it perfect? No. Could it be pushed further? Absolutely yes. But at the end of the day, I learned more. Like I did study more things, and I improved quite a few pieces of this painting that would have been I improved the painting, and I improved myself is the point. But I was also just like so stuck in this land of like, I can't work on the whole painting. I just keep having to stop and study and stop and do something else and stop and do something else, and I just was reaching a point of like, I can't do that anymore because I'm going to kill the painting for myself, and I didn't want to let that happen. So the idea that art is never finished, only abandoned, is something that resonates with me, because that's absolutely how I feel. Is it just has to reach a point of like, okay, I have to be done, and then it is done. Yeah. So thank you for watching the video. If you have any comments or questions or anything, just leave it down below. I don't think I have any questions this time either. I'm thinking. I had a question last time. I guess the same question applies, where hopefully the speed was okay. That's still kind of a gray area, but I'll figure it out eventually, I guess. Well, I guess that's it. I genuinely can't think of anything right now, and I'm sure there is something that I meant to ask you guys for your opinion or feedback on. But who knows? I certainly don't. So, I love you guys. I give you kisses. I'll see you next time. Mwah.